What is the most important thing finance leadership needs to do if they want to have a great FP&A function?
What's the most important or the hardest thing? I like to gravitate to this.
Today's guest is Darrell Cox. He is a seasoned finance leader with over 25 years of experience building high-performing teams at high-growth companies. He is currently Chief Financial Officer at Vena Software and has held senior roles at Vena Solutions, FreshBooks, and WinMobile. Darrell has led over $1 billion in exits and funding, scaled finance functions, and driven strategic growth by extending the role of finance beyond the numbers.
What's maybe the most counterintuitive insight you've had as you've gone through the data, like where it's just shocked you? Oh, wow, we need to really rethink some things because that's very different from what I would have expected.
The ones that I come across more often is people think, because it's a cheap leads are cheap to acquire, that's going to be a lower cost of acquisition overall. But that's not always the case when you start looking at the conversion rates. A cheap lead might not convert. If you're looking at expensive leads, it might convert at 100%. Your cheap lead might convert at 10%. Depending on the cost of those things, it might be actually better off investing in the expensive leads. Totally counterintuitive. The mid-market customers are actually more profitable on the long term than an enterprise client, which was completely counterintuitive because people think with these huge whale deals, you're going to make all this more money.
Sales doesn't always love finance. Any advice you'd offer to FP&A people about how to partner, how to develop that relationship with sales? Because I think a lot of people struggle in that area.
I've seen this so often, right? Your main objective is to make them
FP&A guy here, a message from our title sponsor. What if you could delegate your busy work to your most intelligent team member? What if that team member was an AI agent? Meet Be Easy by FutureView Systems, the agentic AI platform to automate entire finance and accounting processes. Our collection of adaptable AI agents integrate with your financial data, handle complex workflows across systems, including our Excel add-in, so you can focus on being a strategic business partner. Modern FP&A can be easy. To learn more, visit beeasyfinance.com. That's the letters beeasyfinance.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Tomorrow, where we delve into the world of financial planning and analysis, examining its current state and future prospects. I'm your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A guy, and I'll be guiding you through the evolving landscape of FP&A. Each week, we're joined by thought leaders, industry experts, and practitioners who share their insights and experiences, helping us navigate today's complexities and tomorrow's uncertainties. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting your journey in FP&A, this show has something for everyone. This week, I'm thrilled to be joined by Darrell Cox. Darrell, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know we've got the opportunity to chat a few times, and now we have to put it on record. Whether that's good or not, we'll find out. So let me give a little bit of background about Darrell. Darrell has over 25 years of leadership experience. He has built and led high-performing teams across high-growth companies. He is currently the CFO at Vena Software and previously served as CFO at LMN and Vena Solutions. His leadership journey also includes senior roles at FreshBooks, Virgin Mobile, WinMobile, Rogers Communications, and ATI Technologies, which was later acquired by AMD. Throughout his career, Darrell has led over $1 billion in exits and funding transactions, developed and scaled finance and leadership teams, and implemented systems and processes that enabled sustainable growth. He is known for extending the role of finance beyond the numbers, helping organizations drive strategic growth and improve operational efficiency. Darrell is passionate about evolving FP&A into strategic finance by forging strong partnerships across the business and connecting financial insights to operational and revenue data. All right, how was that for a background? Did we cover it?
Yeah, I think that was adequate.
I always find it weird when someone reads them for me. I don't know, and I'm assuming others kind of feel the same way. It's like, did I do all those?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I remember that one, but what about this?
Yeah, it's like, makes me want to blush. Anyway.
Go for it. You're welcome to blush.
Thanks for working through that.
No, it was great. I love your background, and I'm excited because I think you have a really great background for the show. I want to start with this question. It's one we ask every guest. What does great FP&A look like? How would you describe it?
So that's I've been like an FP&A person for my virtually my entire career. And like you read there on my bio, I think great FP&A is about really strategic finance. I mean, it's become separated. Like some companies actually have separate groups for strategic finance and FP&A, but I think really great FP&A is actually strategic finance. And why I say that is I think if you are an FP&A or if you're running an FP&A team or something like that, you should be striving to drive performance. And you really can from that seat. You have everything you need, or theoretically, you should have everything you need to be able to actually do that. The soft skills, the data, and the systems to enable you to do that.
I have to ask a follow-up. What's your take? Do you think there is a need for strategic finance if FP&A is being done right? Because you kind of mentioned FP&A is strategic finance. I'm just kind of curious your take on that, as we have seen a little bit of a trend of more and more kind of strategic finance maybe being separated sometimes from FP&A.
Even if a company doesn't think they need strategic finance, I think they could benefit from strategic finance. If you don't have an FP&A team that's behaving or targeting being strategic, and then who's doing that for you? And it could be somebody else. Maybe, strategic finance has evolved because FP&A wasn't doing it. I don't know every situation, but you often find in some organizations this tussle between ops and finance. Is finance centralized or is there finance outside of finance? I think the fact is you do need what strategic finance delivers, which is thinking about how you can drive better business results by analyzing the numbers, making better business decisions, and driving action from that. If it's in the FP&A team, I think there's a lot of benefit. If it's not in the FP&A team, who's doing it? I think is the question you should ask yourself.
I think that's a great question. And I like how you said there's always that struggle of, what sits in finance, what sits in operations. When I worked at American Express, we called a lot of roles shadow finance because it didn't sit in finance, but they were basically doing finance. And I'm guessing, I know you've worked for some large telecommunications companies. I'm sure you saw some of that where you're like, hey, why
Oh,
is this role in
100%.
the business?
Yeah, there's a lot of times there's a business partner within the business unit. There's pros and cons. I think the biggest con though is they tend to go a little bit native, and they also don't have like the ability to really truly leverage, and cross pollinate the FP&A team. A lot of the same data is used for a lot of different purposes, and if it's distributed more widely, sometimes you don't get the benefit.
I'm curious from your perspective, having been in the leadership chair, having been a CFO, what is the most important thing finance leadership needs to do if they want to have a great FP&A function? If they want the FP&A to really, accomplish what it needs to.
When sometimes people ask like, what's the most important or the hardest thing? And I like to gravitate I like to talk about the people skills, because something often missing from a finance team. And I think, that's kind of like the street appeal of an FP&A team, that the part of which really enables that team to drive performance. But that's always assuming they have the right enablement. What's so tragic to see sometimes is like a finance team that's really struggling to do that, that's got the right attitude. They know how to empathize with their business partners, but they're not enabled. They don't get the right investment. Either they don't have the right people, like resources, but more often it's they haven't got the right systems. They don't get access to the data, for whatever reason that might be. But really, most of the time, it just boils down to investments. Maybe the potential isn't well understood at more senior management, or it hasn't been articulated, or they haven't seen an example of it be successful. So making the right investment in the right technology to get the most out of your data, the plumbing. I mean, it's no good having a beautiful bathroom if there's no water coming to it. It's just not going to work.
You got a few problems if there's no water.
You got to have the plumbing. The plumbing's got to be there. And then the worst thing is, this is a thing I've seen before too. Is like, if you can't deliver the finance team, if you're not delivering value, if you're not seen to be strategic, if you're just delivering reports, people don't come to you to ask the right questions. You're not invited to the right meetings. You don't get a seat at the table. And then it's this downward spiral. You can't get the investment and you just get stuck.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. You kind of get stuck becoming nothing but a report function.
Yeah, it's demoralizing. And then you don't get the best staff. So it just keeps on getting worse.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody that enjoys business partnering and really wants to be viewed as strategic is going to stay long term in a role where they're basically a report monkey, so to speak.
Yeah. No, it's no fun. You're not getting challenged.
I agree. I think there's some great points there. So in your career, you've worked for 3 companies in the accounting and finance space. I think the last 3 before that was telecommunication. FreshBooks, Vena, and Una Software. What is it you like about the space? What's kept you kind of coming back?
I've never felt actually better. You know how people talk about these last 2 roles in particular, like FreshBooks kind of scratched it a bit, but Vena and now Uno in particular, it's like I get to actually contribute to the product directly, indirectly. The product's for me. So I get to like really help my peeps. It's like literally Uno in particular is it's designed to solve the problem I've always tried to solve, like in many places. More broadly, every place I've ever been, I've tried to connect operational data to finance data to solve some kind of problem and drive performance. And this company is designed to do exactly that in a niche where there's not a lot of companies doing it. I mean, the really big companies can afford really big systems that do this. This is not a new concept, but it's so expensive. But in the smaller market, it hasn't been widely available. So companies struggle to solve it with Excel, Power Query, Power Pivot, and all that kind of thing. But they're not really designed specifically to do this, and because they're not, you don't get all the other benefits that come with it. So it's like, so yeah, I'm trying to solve my own problem. Like, how energizing is that? Like, I get up, I'm super excited every day. It's
That's
amazing.
I know it's always fun when you get to kind of solve your own problems. And yeah, I mean, FP&A software, planning, forecasting, as a
Yeah,
CFO, or as you, me, as an FP&A professional, we've all struggled where there's times like, I need better data, I need better insights, I need my partners to share the full information with me, whatever it might be. We've all struggled where you're like, hey, this is the best number I can come up with given the time frame and the limitations I have. But do I have high confidence in it? Not really.
no. Can I do it again really fast? Can everyone, it's like, yeah, I mean, the bonus, like you can do some of this in Excel, but the bonus of doing it in a system, um, is that you can touch more people, you can get more data in it, you can do it more often. So do it over and over and over again, iterate, be really agile. And you're going to have less mistakes. So more credibility, more reliability. It's just like, yeah, like it's like, honestly, it's a great place to be. So I came back.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Una. You mentioned you're trying to solve your problems with them. I know it's a startup that has revenue intelligence and planning platform, but maybe just tell us a little bit about Una, where you're at, what it's been like so far, really what you're trying to solve. Give us a little bit of that overview.
Ah, cool. Yeah. So, first of all, it's actually a tool for FP&A specifically. It brings revenue intelligence into the finance toolbox. So where most finance people, have a planning solution or are doing the planning in Excel, they're at some point they're trying to get leading indicators, right? Because you can really do a lot more with leading indicators than just the lagging indicators. Of course, everybody knows that. But where do you get the leading indicators from? The most powerful ones are in revenue. And, because it's the biggest number, it's the number that the most people in your organization are probably driven by. And, finance often doesn't have access to that. So we're trying to bring that through this revenue intelligence to the finance team. And what it gets you with with better, like the best leading indicators is it gets you more integrated with your business partners, your leadership team. The language of the business aligns you better with their objectives. I mean, makes you more empathetic with the rest of the company, and makes you a more effective business partner. And what it also does is it gets you a better forecast because, especially if you have a longer sales cycle, there's a lot more certainty around your immediate numbers. And, if you've got more certainty, there's more confidence in the plan. You have a smaller buffer. If you got a smaller buffer, that means you're not wasting money sitting there waiting to cover for some problem. You can invest it somewhere. You're going to do better allocations. The list just goes on. I mean, ultimately, you're going to have a better cash flow forecast if it's in one system and it goes from, your lead to an opportunity to sale to revenue to EBITDA to cash. So that's what it's designed to do. Is it's designed to really empower the finance team to drive action and to be, a lever for strategic finance.
Why do you think that's been such a challenge in general with software and, finance having good insight to the revenue data, having that revenue intelligence they want? We see a lot of tools trying to solve it for, you know, the sales organization, but why do you think it's kind of been a struggle on the finance side?
Primarily, the nature of the data is different from finance data. I mean, there's a lot of it. It's also not. It's a little bit. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's just the inherent nature of the data, right? If you're talking about a lead, and there could be 5 or 10 leads for one actual opportunity, and you don't know what the product is when you start, but then there might be some products. But then when you close the deal, you never really know in your CRM system where a lot of this data lives, what the actual amount was. It's just messy. You don't need to be 100% certain, or there's no concept of materiality in sales and marketing data like there is for finance. And then the finance person gets all bent out of shape because it's not reconciled to the dollar, nothing ties. Time frames are different, just like they would report and work weekly or even daily, and you were working on a monthly cadence. It's like month ends don't correspond. You can't reconcile. You get into the meeting and it's like, oh yeah, that data's wrong. And then you spend your whole life reconciling, even if you can get it to connect. But just try connecting invoice, which is the source of truth for the beginning of actual revenue, with a sale. It's like so hard to do. It shouldn't be. I mean, why is it? Sometimes a company will have all of that in one system, so it kind of happens more automatically. But more often, they're different systems. They're not connected. They're in silos. They never touch. And so, it's getting the two things to connect when they were never built intending to connect can be really difficult. And you just get stuck in this like quagmire of reconciling and manual effort. And a lot of times, it just leads to plain old implementation failure. So it's just the cost to do it turns out to be really high. And the business can't see the benefit. What's the ROI? I don't see it. So they stop investing, or they never even start because they're afraid of failure. So it's tough to do.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, anyone who's done implementations where the more data you're asking for, the more complex it becomes, right? You start planning, they're like, "Oh, I want to add all the revenue stuff. I want to add this. I want to add that." You try adding too much, it fails, or you got to do it by chunk, and it starts getting really expensive. There's definitely some challenges the further and further you try to bring in all these different systems and integrate. We've all seen it.
So the good news is that you don't need to use Excel, right? Like Excel's great for the first just few iterations, but you can't get repeatability, and there's always too many problems. So some people go off and build their own systems, and that gets to be really expensive. But that's what you had to do a little while ago to actually make a go of it. Or unless you were like an enterprise, like a really big company, multi-billion-dollar company, then you go buy SAP or something like that. You pay like $500,000 for implementation. But now with modern technology, with AI really bringing down the cost of development and implementation of these kinds of things, it's much more affordable. But there's not a lot of solutions that do it like that. But there are solutions now, and that's what's exciting about today. Being in finance and aiming for a performance driver kind of goal is you can now do this. You don't the risk of implementation failures.
Yeah, we're definitely I was talking to someone just yesterday of a tool that's you're really focused on trying to make as much of the modeling process, building the data model, all that AI, kind of almost self.
It's also now being able to build a proper database to really leverage AI. Like some of the older solutions, also they might be an OLAP database, they might be a relational database, but you really need the benefit of both. So now it's even cheaper to do that kind of thing too, right? And so if you got the right database to put your AI on, it's like then you're really supercharging things.
Yeah, and you're starting to see kind of more and more of that combo, trying to both give you the benefit of relational and object, because they both have different strengths in areas where you need both in an ideal world, but it's challenging technically. It's getting easier. It can get costly. Something I'd love to get from you is, we talked about kind of AI, how it can help with the model, but I would love to know is that, kind of CFO, you've obviously gone through this budget process many a times in different roles. When you're building a revenue forecast, which is really where the forecast starts. I think any good forecast starts with revenue, with few exceptions. If you're working in pharmaceuticals, but we won't talk about that. Research type things. But, walk through the process. How do you think about revenue? How do you kind of go about, building that revenue forecast?
First, I know this is what you're thinking too, that it's a nonstop process. It doesn't start or finish. It's just a circle. It just keeps on rolling along. And the way I think about that to make it the most effective that it can possibly be is it's a continuous process. And the more often I do it, the better, the easier. The more data I bring into it, the better insights I'm going to get, the better, more value as a finance person I'm going to be able to bring to the process to just ask all the helpful questions that we need to. I'm also going to have a better idea of the levers that we can pull or suggest or to really, or resources I might need to allocate and what the team's thinking about, the better integrated I am. And bring in as many people as possible so everyone feels aligned with the process. And during that process, it's asking as many questions I possibly can. It's really getting integrated, right? Like so often, in other companies, I show up, and there's an established go to market kind of process with like a weekly sales call or something like that. And finance isn't even at the table. Getting yourself integrated and participating, they won't have access to the data. Get the data somehow. You got to ingratiate yourself though. It's not something where you show up and say, "Hey, I'm at the meeting," or "Give me the data." It's like you got to work your way into it. But it's always asking the questions. And when you're doing that, who am I talking to? What's their objective? What are they trying to accomplish? And while this is happening, there's the machine, hopefully by some point in this process. So what I like to have is, an actual database. Like I described earlier, I built them in Excel. I've hired Scrum teams and outsourced Ukraine and everything to build these things. Once you got that going, the machine will tell you something, but you always have to do the top down as well, right? And so the top down is sanity to check at the end, but it's also target setting at the beginning. So it's running all of these things in parallel all the time and making sure they sync up. And it's trying to get everybody aligned is really the main output around a target. And then if you're not hitting it where you think you can be, adjusting the target to match so that the sales team always feels motivated and excited, and that you as a finance person are always setting the target appropriately, either helping the sales team set achievable but slightly challenging targets, or putting a mind in board's head so they feel comfortable when things are happening, and also so you can thread that through your cash flow or other expectations or in your resource allocations, and somehow to make sure that you're headed in the right direction as an organization on the whole. But it's like it's the bottom up, getting all the detail to shoot out what it leads to, given that where things are today, where the trends are pointing to, using that top down to help calibrate. Maybe you need to adjust your top down, but maybe you have levers. Usually you do. What can you do to help the team make the target? And short of that, adjust the target, to make sure that it's all coming together. And it's just, if you're doing it frequently enough, there's no one surprised and everything's working in unison. And you're making all those minute adjustments, you know, and that's, I don't know, is that too high level? Did you,
That's helpful. I'm gonna drill in a little bit. I mean, first, I felt like, 1, you need to be a psychologist. You gotta manage a lot of relationships in there. 2, there's the system side, which you mentioned, right? You gotta get the data right. You gotta be able to roll that up. But really, after that, the process is a lot of getting people aligned, figuring out how it compares to targets, being able to get everybody comfortable and excited about a number so you have a higher chance of reaching it. Because 'Cause we've all been in the situation, I've seen it where sales sees the target and it's like, "I can't hit that." Like, there's no chance. And they're demoralized because 'cause they're like, "Well, I'm never gonna hit quota every month, and I could earn more elsewhere. Why would I deal with this?" So, that's why I say there's a huge incentive and kinda psychological component, and having written some commission plans in one of the companies I worked with and have got them wrong and pissed off all the salespeople, I've learned a
every
lot
plan's going
about.
to be wrong. It's just, that's the only thing for sure about every plan. They
Well,
all have
yeah, it's
that in
definitely gonna be
common.
wrong, but when you really miss some of the incentives and you pissed them all off, generally not a good thing. But,
No,
I learned a
it's,
lot. I
yes.
won't deny that.
The finesse is in how wrong and how fast it's going to be and how quickly you can correct and make those fine adjustments. Yeah, that's our challenge.
That's a huge part of it is how quickly can you get everybody back aligned, figure out what went wrong and how you align it. So, kind of two-part question. When you talk of the getting all the data, what's the data you typically, like to have? What level of data? Maybe just talk a little bit of when you're thinking revenue data, what's ideal world? What are the things you're wanting?
So that can mean lots of different things. It could be supply chain, it could be inventory, it could be all these things. But where I love to live is the CRM data. So, if you, especially if you're running like a two-stage or three-stage sale process with BDRs and SEs and stuff like that, or whatever you call in the organization, that is such a gold mine. And I've found so much return in that data so many times. It's my go-to place. It's also, I mean, we were talking about earlier, one of the hardest places, right? So you get out of your Salesforce or your HubSpot or your equivalent, whatever that might be. Data on, your sales leads is far up the funnel as you possibly can, where it's still practical. Because if you go way up there, it's just not practical. But and then if you're able to course and chart history of, how much leads converted to opportunities on specific cohort basis, and measure the amount of time on average it takes, when they start talking about paper, negotiating a deal, how much time it gets through that, the different stages there. Once you've got some history there, it's just invaluable, because you can tell like 6 months in advance like how much you're going to sell, and that's usually where a forecast starts, the sale. Wouldn't it be? Is It's so much better if you can get a leading indicator on that. And we spoke a little bit about all the benefits that can get you. And so the problem is when you get in there, it's a ton of data, and I want all of it, because you don't never know when you're going to swizzle it a certain way or get a certain insight from a different place, or if things are changing. You really need the granularity. It's like that whole like measuring the whole area under a triangle, right? You got to, like, the smaller the little triangles, the better the calculation is, right? I don't want these giant chunky triangles. I want little tiny ones. And one of the best practical examples on how that can be useful, even from a straight finance point of view, is to reconcile to the data, you have to have daily data. Usually when you're trying to set one of these things up, and the techies are all going to be like, yeah, you want this weekly or monthly or something like that? So no, I need to be able to reconcile between the weekly ops meetings and my monthly financials, and the month ends and the weekends almost never correspond. So it's like, and then, if you're going to change something, if you're going to change sales territories, or you're going to add products or something like this, if the more data that you have, the more historic data you can preserve, you can regroup things. If you make sea changes, like big changes, and you don't have the detail in your historic data, you can't map it. So you just lose all your historic relevancy, right? So there's so many reasons to have lots of data. So yeah, the more data, the better. And you bring it all in, and you put it through your cohort models, and it could give you such counterintuitive insights.
So what's maybe the most counterintuitive insight you've had as you've gone through the data? Like, do you have an example where it's just shocked you, where like, oh wow, we need to really kind of rethink some things because that's very different from what I would have expected.
The ones that I come across more often is people think, because it's a cheap lead, leads are cheap to acquire, that's going to be a lower cost of acquisition overall. But that's not always the case when you start looking at the conversion rates. A cheap lead might not convert as, if you're looking at expensive leads, it might convert at 100%. Your cheap lead might convert at 10%. And depending on the cost of those things, it might be actually better off investing in the expensive leads than in the cheap leads. Totally counterintuitive. In one example, and this was this was played part of it. It was part of a bigger lifetime value to cost of acquisition analysis, but this was a major part of it. Was the mid-market customers are actually more profitable on the long term than an enterprise client, which was completely counterintuitive, because people think with these huge whale deals, you're going to make all this more money. But in fact, when you looked at the close cycle on a cast, like how long it took to close a deal like that, and how long it took it to ramp it up to its full revenue potential, and you couple that with the actual differences in costs at every step, and the churn, which everyone says, oh yeah, the mid-market companies are going to churn faster. But when you added it all up, the mid-market company was actually more profitable in the long term and more cash efficient. So the business did an entire strategic move to to focus on mid-market first as opposed to enterprise first, which is where they were.
FP&A guy here with a brief message from our title sponsor. Modern FP&A requires modern solutions. Imagine relying on a digital teammate to handle your complex and tedious work around the clock while you drive strategy and value for your organization. That's a reality with Be Easy by FutureView Systems, the agentic AI platform to automate entire finance and accounting processes. Our collection of adaptable AI agents integrate directly with your financial data, handle complex workflows across systems, including our Excel add-in, and do all of the legwork so you can focus on being a strategic business partner. These intelligent agents have financial and accounting knowledge, can analyze and provide detailed insights, generate email drafts, answer any questions about your data, and manage multi-system workflows to complete tasks while you remain in the loop and manage the process. Don't just chat with AI, unleash it in a secure, reliable, and controlled environment, and 3x your output. Modern FP&A can be easy. To learn more, visit beeasyfinance.com. That's the letters beeasyfinance.com. You're right. A lot of times we automatically think, okay, enterprise is more profitable. On the flip side, they often have more negotiating leverage. They take more effort. And sometimes you think, I can't lose the deal. So you get a lot more aggressive on pricing, which you'd never do with the mid-market. And before you know it, you're lucky if you're making money off that deal because you've kind of put yourself in a tough spot.
But you have to get into the detail to actually see that, to actually prove your hypothesis. Most people just assume. There's a ton of different reasons.
No, I agree with you. And that's where the gold mine is, when you can dig in that to data and support it saying, look, what do you think's happening? All right, here's what the data is actually showing. And it's eye-opening when you can have those conversations and bring the data and get everybody comfortable with the data. That's the best when you got everybody on the same page. You're like, oh yeah, I believe the data now.
The whole Cuba thing. Okay, so we just talked about, having the right data and the right systems to get to the insight, and that's where the finesse comes in. Because if you just come into the meeting room with a baseball bat and see, look, I was right and you're wrong, that's not going to work. You got to have that EQ, kind of like ask the questions. There's so many good reasons to ask the questions. One, you might be wrong. Did you miss something? You don't want to look like an idiot. Number
I've
two
had
is
it before.
help the team get to their own conclusion. A lot of this stuff they know, right? It's just no one's put it in this put it all together like this and pitched it. So how you do that last mile is so important.
No, I learned a lot of that. I worked at a company where we didn't have any customer P&Ls. Our data was just terrible. And it took me 6 months just to try to even figure out what all our different products, product margin was, just to get a gross after cost of goods sold and contribution. And then we started to dig into specific customers. I remember we found some real surprises. Like we had 1 month and given this customer, I want to say, we'll just call it about a 10% discount. And for some reason, nobody ever asked. It continued to be billed that way for years. And I said something to the salesperson. They're like, what's this? And I'm like, I'd asked our billing team. I told, that's the discount they get every month. And she followed up, and it was supposed to be a 1-month discount. It had been $1 million because we've been giving it for 3 years. You're just like, oh my goodness,
Yes, but you can't see that in the meeting.
So that was a fun one that we fixed. We're like, hey, we found an extra, 30,000 a month or whatever it was. I want to shift gears in a second, but I want to ask one last question on the sales area. Any advice you'd offer to FP&A people about how to partner, how to develop that relationship with sales? Because I think a lot of people struggle in that area. Sales doesn't always love finance. Finance and sales often kind of have different personalities. And I've seen a lot of people struggle in building that relationship and learning how to hold them accountable. So any advice you'd give to somebody who's listening, who's like, I have a really hard time with this?
I've seen this so often, right? And I've even had private conversations with CEOs, and they're like, yeah, that's just a natural relationship. Just sales, and sales and finance never going to get along. But thankfully, I've learned a lot since that meeting, and I have a different perspective on it. First of all, what sales does is actually really hard. Yeah, month end's tough. to close, and quarter end's tough to close, especially if you got some public reporting or anything like that to do. But imagine if you had a bag to carry, you had to book sales or you're not going to get paid. Okay, it's hard, it's stressful, and you really have to appreciate that. And then when you look at from your chair in FP&A, and if these are your business partners, they're not just some random stranger. Really, you're not. Your main objective is not to hold them accountable. Your main objective is to make them successful. Like, how do you align yourself to them to really help them remove roadblocks, make them successful? If they're successful, you're successful. Holding them accountable is just raising a problem and putting another roadblock, speed bump in their path. What you want to do is remove speed bumps, and our job is directly related to that. It's like what we do can help set better quotas, get better resource allocations, help direct them to customers that are more profitable to close or quicker to close, help them get to where they need to be. In doing so, you're all going to be better. So it's like I find the most successful way to build a relationship with anybody is to come, bearing gifts, not to go with a rubber stamp and a hatchet, right? And it's like, you're wrong. Why did you spend that $30? That wasn't in the policy. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like important to be their partner and to enable them than to simply just hold them accountable. That's part of it. But you're the one who helps set the target that they're going to be held to. Let's work together and make sure it's the right one, and then approach the problem like it's both our problems.
A lot there. I won't go over all of it, but I loved, he kind of started with the whole empathy thing, recognizing their job is hard. And that allows you to build a relationship. So I love that you started there. I love that you said, hey, it's not about holding them accountable. It's helping them achieve their goals. And then it's a we thing. It's not a them.
Yeah.
I always hate when you're like, you guys missed your numbers. No, we missed our numbers.
Yeah.
We're all
Because then
part-
they come back with your target was wrong. Your budget is wrong.
Yeah. And it just, that never ends well, right? You just
No.
go, everybody leaves the meeting like, all right, it's your problem.
Yeah.
And you don't accomplish anything. So great advice. I appreciate that. I want to talk about later this year, you're going to be speaking at FATE. So anyone who doesn't know, that's the Finance and Technology Expo. And the title of your talk is FP&A From Excel to AI, What the Journey Looks Like. So you can give us a little sneak peek on what the journey does look like. I'd love to just hear a little bit of your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't want to give it all away.
That's why I
Paul,
said just a
but,
sneak
can
peek.
give
You
you a
don't have to give it all away. I'll be there, so maybe I'll go listen.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool. See you in New York. It's about the FP&A maturity curve and how the tech stack propels it forward. I mean, we kind of spoke about this very early on in the conversation. It's like, even if we really, really, really want it, you can't wish it to happen. You got to have the tech behind it to make it happen. And, tech is causing, reams and reams and reams of incredibly valuable data to be available. There's just so much of it, you can get buried in it, and the finance team will tend to get buried in it. The most effective way to harness this data and to, like, I said earlier, I want all of it, is to harness the technology tools that are available, the most modern ones, and Excel will always be there. And, but in the more mature organizations who are striving the hardest, and trying to be the most strategic in the finance support they're delivering, they will realize the benefit through the newest technological tools. So be it AI, the most modern databases, automation throughout. It just plays a bigger and a bigger and a bigger role as the team wants to mature and drive more value and really propel performance in that organization.
All righty. So if you want to hear the rest of it, come to New York with Darrell and I, November, I believe 13th and 14th, I believe.
Yes, I think you do have it right. Should be fun.
But yeah, come find us. We'd love to meet you. This will be released before then, so we're good.
Yeah, and I should say, we could make your whole trip worthwhile. We got these really cool EBITDA hats. So who doesn't want an
Oh,
EBITDA
another
baseball hat?
EBITDA hat. Sweet. I have one. I have a vendor sending me one right now. And I'll come
Oh,
get a third one.
there you go.
I collect vendor hats, shirts, and I think mugs at this point or water bottles. I
Okay,
have way
good to
too
know.
many, but
We might have to find a better hat for you then.
hey, I'll take what I can get. Beggars can't be choosers, as I like to say. So I want to shift gears a little bit again before we get into our rapid fire section. Two questions more around career. So the first is when you're looking to hire FP&A professionals, what do you look for in a job candidate? I get asked all the time by people who are trying to make that transition or trying to find a role, and would love to get your thoughts of what are the things you're looking for when you hire somebody in FP&A?
I've hired a lot of FP&A people now in my career. It's like I've distilled it to I don't know, let's call it 3 or 4 things. First, technical skills. That's table stakes. But the type of table stakes on technical skills, sorry, is changing. It's evolving. Where it used to be my first hire would just be someone who's an expert in Excel. It depends on the role, of course. It's increasingly, an in-depth kind of technical skill on how to manage data at large scale. So, it could be MySQL now. Or if we have specific system, we're working with somebody if they don't have experience with that specific system, understands the nuts and bolts of data and how to really extract value and match up data. So it could be Power Query or something like that. But it could be MySQL too. So something like that. It's also the logic thought processing. So even if you have the best technical skill, I don't, if somebody thinks like me, I find we get things done a lot faster and it's a lot more fun to work with this person. So I always have a case study as part of an FP&A interview process. Comes near the end and usually involves like a preparation of a presentation that is as much about how you're thinking about things and not what you present specifically.
Sure.
It's super great if you're smarter than me. That I always love. It's also culture. Culture fit is a really big one. So it's technical culture. That I find is a deal breaker. And the last one I would say is opportunity fit. What are their goals? What are the objectives? Do they understand about that whole concept? Are they going to be a good business partner? So not enough to just have the culture, but also be thinking about the same kind of goals and looking for the same kind of outcome in the longer term.
Yeah, so it sounds like kinda, there's 3 pieces. You wanna see somebody technically that can really get their hands dirty with data, and especially more obviously, it depends on the role. More senior, you may be looking a little different, but, if they're gonna be working a lot with data, you want them to have those skills of being able to handle large data sets. There's obviously the cultural fit, as you mentioned, and then you wanna see how they think logically, how they can kinda manage things, and can they, really kinda how they think about problems. Is that a fair kind of assessment?
Yeah, I almost bundle that. So if I say go through, it's like technical. It's which also could include depending on the role. Like if they're super junior, more nitty gritty with the data. But if they're more senior, it's about presentation.
Sure.
So it's technical, it's culture, and opportunity kind of goals
That's
slash
right,
up.
yeah, you talk
Those
about
would be the three.
goals and alignment. Because if you're not aligned, even if they take the role, are you gonna keep them very long?
Exactly correct. Yes.
And nobody wants to churn their employees every 6 months.
No. No.
Alright, so last question before we move into, the FP&A section here, where we have some questions we ask every guest. If an FP&A professional wants to become a CFO one day, so that's kind of their goal. They know going into the FP&A, they've been working in it, say 5 years. And they're kind of trying to figure out, that how to chart the path to CFO. What advice would you offer them? Any advice you'd offer to that FP&A professional?
Probably the first one is be performance oriented, make an impact. It's like make an impact, but it's also the right impact. It's like it's not like the PR thing where any publicity is good publicity. You actually have to be thinking about your business partner and really striving to help them be successful, and that you will make a mark in being the best business partner you can be. That's super important. Another part is stick with it. I've seen a lot of FP&A people. There's some of them are just so smart, and I like to hire those people. But sometimes it's always about it's that objective thing, strapping them into the chair. They're too impatient. You got to have patience for some of this. It's not just going to happen. And it's the people skill around that. So that's part of the people skill. So really develop your people skills. make an impact, be patient, and always have your end objective in mind. Just like you can course correct and you can course correct on other things, but if you're headed always for this some North Star, it'll work out.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So the FP&A section, these are some questions we pretty much ask every guest, at least a few of them. So we get repeat answers sometimes, very different answers sometimes, but love to see how everybody thinks about these. So if I asked you, what's the number one technical skill for FP&A professionals to master, what would you say?
You're gonna be expecting this, I think. It's going to be how to master your data, how to integrate your non-financial data more specifically. It could be Excel at first, depends where you're at. It could be MySQL. We talked about that. It could be, Power Query, or it could be go out and get another system that you don't even know what the right system is today. It's like, but it's not about the system. It's not about the technology. It's get that technology so you can master your data. So it's appropriate for your data where you are today, and it'll solve the problem you have.
Yeah, understanding how to work with data to be able to master your data. One of the things that was most beneficial for me is my first role. I was called a finance analyst. It was really a business analyst type roles. I did report writing for a couple of years, and so there's a lot of database work around that. We implemented a BI tool, MicroStrategy at the time. Wrote a ton of reports, worked in Access, a lot of SQL, and so I really understood data structure and databases. I didn't want to be a technical person. I was never someone who wanted to write code, but it was just invaluable to understand the data throughout my career. I was able to do a lot of things with Power Query that they're like, oh, wow, you're able to get to that data, in companies that were total messes and provide reports that were adding a lot of value. So I'm with you. Being able to provide insights out of that data because you really understand it and you can dig in and do it is a huge value.
So if I could tune that answer a little bit, so I just answered from one point of view there, but if you're like a director or CFO even in the right kind of company, you need to be thinking about your staff that way as well as your technology. So it's like, do you have a controller and an AP clerk and something that maybe? Do you have an FP&A person who's great in Excel? Maybe. But do you have the person to implement that technology? Are you going to be relying on an outsource person to do it? Or are you going to get people to get buy-in to buy that? Charting your path to do that is also really important, and making sure that you have the organizational support that you require to get that done.
No, great point there. So number 2, what is the number one soft or human skill we need to master?
That's a big question. Like there's so many of them, right? But yeah, I'm going to go with the listening skills, and patience. So it's like listening. So first, find out who's in the room, what do they want, what is their objectives. Not about what yours are and what information is that you have at hand. So when you're going into business partner review and they're a salesperson, are you going to talk to them about expenses, or are you going to talk to them about revenue? It makes a big difference in that meeting. And so listening, understanding, and then when you're delivering, it's not like this is what I think you should do. It's about asking the right questions, right? So it's how to communicate, which starts with how you listen, and really empathizing, putting yourself in their shoes, really understand, and that'll really help you get ahead.
Yeah, listening and empathy is one we get a lot. It's amazing how often that comes up. It's huge. All right, this is kind of a fun one. I'm curious to see what you'll say on this one. If Excel removed one feature tomorrow, which one would cause you the most panic?
Oh, it's a beautiful question. I mean, if it couldn't add or subtract, that'd be my biggest worry because it's basically grade 3 math all day. But this is a recent one actually, and it caused me a great deal of consternation. Was using Excel in the cloud the other day, and Control or Shift backspace, use that to go back to trace all the doesn't work. So you know how much grief that caused me? So my God, yeah, there's so many things you take for
So if
granted in
we had to
Excel.
go to online Excel and lost a bunch of our shortcuts, that would be
Oh,
your night.
disaster. Yeah.
Yeah, Excel online's got a lot better, but it still has some progress. Or being stuck using an Apple would be another problem there.
Oh my God, yeah, no.
Love it. All right. I'm curious to see how you'll answer this one. If I asked you to describe the job of finance, not just FP&A, but finance in a whole, as a whole. You have to do it in one sentence or less. How would you define it?
The job of finance is to drive performance like everybody else in the organization. It's just from our point of view, using our skills.
So drive performance. I like it. That's a good one. All right, now we're going to move on to this last section where we get to know you a little bit before we wrap up here. So tell us about a hobby or passion you have. What do you do in your spare time when you're not working?
So I read a ton, fiction and nonfiction. I read, I would say like 2-to-1 fiction to nonfiction, because the nonfiction takes me a lot longer to get through. I like to make a lot of marginalia. But my favorite of the nonfiction books is kind of a bridge to fiction. It's a little bit of story. It's biographies. I love a good biography. I don't know if you've read Shoe Dog, the Phil Knight story at all. That's one of my, what a beautiful to be told story, right? Like that was pretty good. And then, but it's not just about business. I picked up on the street one day when I was walking home. There's this little box of books. It said free on it, and then there was this big thick book. It had like Hitler down the spine. So I brought that home. Found out it was the second of a 2-book set. So then I had to find the first book, which was out of print, or it wasn't available, or something like that. Anyway, both by this guy Ian Kershaw, I think. Holy crap, that was a crazy book. Anyway, something like that can just keep me so like absorbed. It's just so much fun. So I do a lot of that. And if there was a second place, which explains me more, maybe from a finance point of view, is I'm really into art and design. So whatever it is, a house, architecture, old car, or something like that. And I think that's probably why I can really appreciate a well-built model. If it's just all lined up and logical and color-coded properly, makes my heart.
That explains it. All right. If you could have any job in the world for 1 week, what job would you pick and why?
I've answered this before, and Churchill jumps to mind, but for this though, I'm going to say Andy Grove. Andy Grove, when he was at his peak, and until I want that job, that his job, right? Because not only was he a numbers guy, he had this incredible business insight and ability to sell. Like it was like the dream FP&A job was to be the CEO of Intel when Andy Grove was in that seat.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. He definitely knew how to sell. I've read some stuff there.
Oh yeah, crazy story.
And you have to have a theme song to walk on stage to give your presentation. What song you picking?
I'm picking the Mission Impossible theme. And, because I like to do hard stuff and really push the envelope. That's what makes it worthwhile. There's usually a happy ending in that movie.
I haven't watched any of the Mission Impossible, so I don't know. Is there always a happy ending?
Well, yeah, it's a Hollywood, it's got Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I figured it's like James
Pretty
Bond. There's
formulaic.
always a happy ending. So last question, and then we'll ask how people can contact you. So if you had to offer one last piece of advice for people to be a better business partner, FP&A people, what would be your parting advice?
To be the best business partner that you could be, you got, just put yourself in their shoes every time you go in to talk to them. It's like, and that should form your entire interaction with them. It's like, bring the data they're interested in, bring the story that they want to hear, and really try to make them successful. That's your role as a business partner. It's not about what data you might have. It's about what data they want. It's your use case. It's not yours.
If someone wants to maybe get in touch with you, learn more about you or what you're doing at Una Software, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way is to find me on LinkedIn, and I'm Darrell Cox, CFO at Vena Software. So yeah, easiest way to find me. I'm pretty responsive.
Well, we'll throw that in the show notes, and thank you for joining me. It was a lot of fun, Darrell. I enjoyed chatting with you today, and I'm really excited for our audience to get to hear this.
Super thrilled to have been here. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Always love your show, man.
Thanks for listening to FP&A Tomorrow. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a review on your podcast platform of choice. This allows us to continue to bring you great guests from around the globe. As a reminder, you can earn CPE credit by going to earmarkcpe.com, downloading the app, taking a short quiz, and getting your CPE certificate. To earn continuing education credits for the FPAC certification, take the quiz on Earmark and contact me, the show host, for further details.